Welcome. I'm Rebecca Bailey, president of the Metro Atlanta chapter of the Women's National Book Association. This panel is being done in association and with other chapters as well. The Nashville, New Orleans, and South Florida chapters all participated. Thank you to all of those chapter members who are online as well. And without further ado, I will pass this on to our fantastic moderator, Mel Todd.
Hey everybody, my name is Mel Todd. I'm owner and publisher of Bad Ash Publishing, and we have a great panel for you guys today. We have four amazing women. They're going to talk about being women authors and people who deal with both writing and the flavor of literature here in the South. So I'd like to go ahead and have them introduce themselves. And Bernie, why don't you start?
I'm Bernie Johnson or Bernadette Johnson. I'm from Atlanta. I still live in Georgia, and I write both fiction and nonfiction. And you can find my stuff at berniejohnson.com. So
Carolyn?
that's it.
Hi, I'm Caroline Randall Williams. I am based here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a writer in residence at Vanderbilt University, and I'm a poet, essayist, and occasional cookbook author and young adult novelist. So I like to write stuff. Genre is irrelevant for my life. Nice to meet everybody.
Cecilia.
Hello, I am Cecilia Dominic. By day, I am a sleep psychologist. I help people sleep without drugs. By night, I write page-turning urban fantasy, steampunk, and nonfiction that keeps my readers up all night. Is it a conflict of interest or a diabolical business plan? You decide. I am based here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I knew that I had to do that intro or Mel would be very disappointed in me.
Amanda.
My name is Amanda Heckert, and I'm the executive editor of Garden and Gun magazine. We're based here in Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm originally from the upstate of South Carolina. I did live in Atlanta for about a decade and a few other places, but I've been in Charleston and at this job for about 8.5 years. And if you're not familiar with the magazine, we are a national magazine about Southern culture and lifestyle, and we write and I edit about a lot of things from food and drink, music and arts, traditions, culture, travel, adventure, gardens, homes, sort of everything that sort of hits the lifestyle bell. So yeah, that's what I do.
Well, so let's get into it. One of the things that everybody here has in common is they're both from the South and women. What is it that you either think that you bring to your writing or that you're seeking for in the writing that you're editing and that you're looking to put into your magazines that's different because you're a woman and you're a woman from the South, which we all know, because I'm not Southern at all. So trust me, I understand some of the differences that I run head on to sometimes. What did you look for? Caroline, let's start with you.
For me, my writing as a serious profession became clear to me when I moved back south. I went to college and I went to high school in New England. I went to college in New England. I got placed in the Mississippi Delta for Teach for America. And after 2 years of teaching school, my journey at my career path, I was like, am I going to be a shrink? Am I going to be a lawyer? Am I going to be a writer? Like, I wasn't sure which one of those things I wanted to do. And after returning to the South, I was like, I have to write this. So I guess the answer to the question is, for me, is that, the particular peculiar witnessing of the ways of life down here and the sounds of it and the injustices of it and the charms and joys of it that sort of were ingrained in me in a way that I hadn't identified when I moved away. When I started hearing them again from the vantage of like adulthood or early adulthood, but adulthood, I was like, wow, these are musical and really worthy of chronicling, and I feel called to help chronicle them. So I think just a calling to bear witness to what's down here And also like the food writing, the food. I had the Southern food is an important part of my identity. So yeah.
Cecilia?
I feel that I got it a little bit more at the start of my career as a psychologist than I did as an author. For example, for about the first 10 years of my career, my older patients would ask me, "And how long have you been doing this?" Which, of course, is Southern for, "Are you old enough to be my doctor?" And so when I write, especially when I'm writing set in the South, it's keeping in mind the language nuances and how Southerners tend to be a lot more indirect with sometimes how they ask and how they approach things, even how we order food. Like we go to restaurants, we're like, "I would like blank." Whereas, I go up north and my northern cousins tell the waitress, "I want blank." And I'm like, "That's so rude." So it's been interesting experiencing like I said, the differences of languages, the nuances, even like down to nonverbals and eye contact. And at putting those in books, it really helps to get the flavor of a place.
Amanda?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, it's something that we think about a lot. I mean, certainly a sense of place, and our name even sort of evokes a relationship to the land, and that's not always a positive relationship. It can be a complicated relationship, but really evoking place and the effect the place has on the story and the writer is a big part of what we do. I think also like an authentic voice. It's very easy to fall into the tropes of Southernness, and we definitely are not interested in it. I mean, I say y'all. I mean, I'm not saying I say y'all, but that there is a genuineness and an authenticity to the Southern experience that we're looking for beyond the stereotypes and pushing beyond those stereotypes to portray that experience, and really pushing ourselves not to fall into those stereotypes or tropes. And I would say also the ability to to sort of piggyback off what Caroline was saying, was of really to embrace the complications of this place. And that doesn't mean to necessarily that you're giving your stamp of approval to them, but that it is of a whole, it is of a part, and that's part of what makes the South so interesting, and to not brush over those things because that only makes it less interesting.
Bernie?
No. Everyone else answered so well. I feel like people get an idea of, it's like the stereotype thing. People have an idea of what Southerners are, or what they're like, and if they hear your accent or find out you're from Georgia or something like, or wherever. But there are like a multitude of different voices, different opinions, different attitudes, different writing styles, different experiences down here, and it's nice to have people write them, and yes, be able to write or read them, to break some of those stereotypes, or at least find out that it is more complicated, like you say.
Well, what about Southern things that you find slip into your writing, even when you don't necessarily aren't trying to? Like Cecilia's writing something that has nothing to do with the South. I know one of the things that has slipped into my writing is that if the person's having iced tea, I can guarantee you I'm saying whether it's sweet or unsweet, because it is something I've had to learn the hard way here in the South, is always say you want unsweet iced tea. And then when I go back out west, I go unsweet iced tea, and they look at you with this funny look, going, "It's always unsweet. There's sugar
Yeah.
on the table."
You mean tea?
So,
Yeah.
yes. So, what are some things that you find just slip into your writing, even though you aren't even thinking about it? It's become a Southern thing that echoes into the stories you tell. Bernie?
That's hard. I'm having trouble accessing anything, but I know some idiomatic expressions are probably pretty Southern, especially when I write a first draft. I'll go, I'll find, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'll find idioms, and I'm like, oh, other people might not understand that one. Okay, I need to change that. That's something my grandmother said, my, but who's, like some members of my family are extremely Southern. I grew up in Atlanta. I don't mean that's not Southern. Actually, somebody in a history class told me, "Oh, you're from Atlanta. You're not Southern." But but I just mean much heavier accent. Grew up in the country, stuff like. But yeah, like a lot of stuff from them pops in there, and the tea thing actually is something I've thought about before. Where you know, and I'll change. You can change it depending on where you've set the story, because I don't set everything in the South. So, you know, it's I'm sure I miss a lot of stuff though.
Cecilia?
Well, like you, although, well, you didn't grow up here, but I grew up in Birmingham, but my parents aren't Southern. Mom is European and dad's Yankee from Boston. So I don't know that I have a lot of Southern things that necessarily creep into my writing without me realizing it, because I'm always writing as partially an outsider. I would say that, yeah, maybe the iced tea thing, but I've been very conscious about that ever since a Canadian friend of mine tried to order tea at a mellow mushroom, and she asked the waitress if there was any Earl Grey, and the waitress said, "Honey, we have sweet and unsweet." And yeah, poor Tanya. So I don't necessarily know, unless it is maybe that my characters in other places might approach each other in a little bit more of a, like, maybe they're saying hello to strangers, whereas, you know, outside the South, it's not necessarily that common.
Caroline?
Gosh, so I like Cecilia, have one parent who was not raised from here, although her family's, my mom's family were started in Alabama, but then my mom was born in Detroit because the Great Migration, et cetera, and then raised in DC, and then found her way back to Nashville. But she was not a Southerner by habit or verbal practice or whatever. But my dad was from Tennessee, and I was raised here in Nashville. And I think that one that I think of is the collective you as sort of like a formal thing, and then like I can't refer to a group of people as you. Like I have like y'all is my instinct, but then it's like you guys or you everybody. Like I don't know how to just say you, and have that mean plural. Um, that's one. I just can't reconcile with it. I think that I also have, because of my Southern instincts, and a leaning toward identifying people by who their people are. Like this is so and so who is this and this cousin and knows these people, like instead of by what they do, right? Like she does this and works here. Like my friends from the Northeast, they'll be like, well, I have whole friends where I'm like, I have literally no idea what they do or their husband. And I'll be like, but I could tell you like their grandparents, all these things. And that's how I'd introduce them, even if you didn't know their family. Because that sort of lore of who people are relative to others is, I mean, maybe that's not really Southern, but it certainly to me
Oh,
feels
it's Southern.
like part of my
It's
Southern
Southern.
identity. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but it's really like the sense of you, plural you, like vous. I guess that's like the Bible, is thy is the vous versus tu. And yeah, and who's people, identifying people by who they are, who's their people are. Those are my two primary Southernisms that I think just creep accidentally into every piece of writing that I do, that maybe, and also like maybe an irreverent way of living, like having lived in Mississippi, New Orleans, like people, civilized people in the deep South, like they'll just have like 7 bourbons on a Thursday and like and just be like messy, do you know? And then wake up and go to work the next day and nobody has any feeling about how things unfolded at the restaurant the night before, in this way that's very bon vivant and not normal to other people outside of the South. So yeah, those are maybe that one too. And I think I let characters do that, and then people are like, "Oh, well, so what a lush." And I was like, "Oh, I was just describing dinner, but okay, let me dial that back."
Amanda?
These are all great points that are ringing true. A couple of things came to mind or come to mind. One is, as a magazine, we cover the entire South, and we have a very, let's say, liberal view of what we include in the South. You know, some people in, say, West Texas may disagree that they're in the South, but we cover them. You know, Baltimore. I saw someone here was from Baltimore. We cover Maryland. We include DC as the South. But when you're talking, first of all, the South is not a monolith, and even an accent will change from one side of a state to another. In South Carolina, there's probably like 5 different accents you can have, um, probably more. So details matter, like, and our readers really care about those details. Again, especially if they're from a place. Like, speaking of Baltimore, I remember this was before I was even here, but it still like went down in like the Garden and Gun infamy was, we accidentally, or we said in a piece about Baltimore crabs that they were steamed instead of boiled, or boiled instead of steamed, whichever one. It was not what they do there, and readers were very upset. And so just like in writing, like I'm looking for, and I'm trying to like always get those details right so that it rings true, because when it doesn't ring true, it stops the reader in their tracks. And I think, one thing that Caroline was talking about, like how people are related, and that's very much a thing I do too. But also, I feel like, I do this, for better or for worse, but like I relate people to like where they're from, or like that's my go-to icebreaker, because it there's something about like learning where a person is from, even if I don't know anyone there, I've never been there. It's like you pick up on like, oh, you're from Alabama, are you Auburn, or Bam, Roll Tide, and like it gets a conversation going, and like these cultural touch points in the South sort of are also, I think, like sort of a go-to icebreaker for Southerners.
I just hearing that makes me laugh so much because when I got here and married my husband, that was like one of the questions everybody would ask me. And I just look at him with this blank face going, I don't watch football because it meant nothing to me. And there's just this look of horror every single time. And I'm like, I don't care, guys, seriously. So, all of us, one of the interesting things about being a woman is you really do see the world differently. And even regardless of all the politics and stuff going on, what do you think that you bring into your stories that is inherent to how we view the world, which is from a female's point of view? Somebody who can have children, who is looked upon a lot as being the primary caregiver, about the housemaker, about the person who really does know how to love and nurture. How does that change or filter into the stories that you tell? Or, Amanda, because we're going to start with you, the stories that you're actually looking for from your magazine?
Oh gosh. So that's a great question. I will say that like this is sort of a sidebar to your question, but I can't have children. And so I've actually used my writing. It was like one of the first places that I sort of started to work through that, and like through humor. And I even did a story for us about, for Garden and Gun, about that was about something completely different. It was about how to survive, speaking of football, like a football game in the South during like the heat of summer. My mom, I told her she should trademark it, uses something called the peel factor, which is how long it takes her to roll down her pants when she goes to the bathroom. And that's the peel factor. Um, so anyway, I was writing about this for us. My mom loved me. I did not tell her till after I published her peel factor story. But I don't know, was able to like make this joke about how my eggs had clearly baked in like the Columbia, South Carolina sun for all those years. And anyway, it was just like, I don't know, it was a way for me as a woman to start to kind of like the first time I kind of said it out loud to people who weren't my family, but like was able to use humor and also something very sort of Southern to break that ice with it. And so anyway, that's sort of like on the other end of the other side of the coin.
Oh, that's great though. Bernie.
Well, one thing, I actually write a lot of horror on my own. I only have a couple of horror stories out, but like some of the fears, I think some of our fears are quite different. Being a woman, I grew up in an area where there was at least one, possibly two serial killers going at the same time, one killing children, one killing women. I was told to avoid getting anywhere near a van, there's all these fears that, walking down the street, looking over my shoulder, and things that have happened to a lot of us that, just feed into the especially by horror stuff, but unfortunately, but yeah, so there's a lot of that. I think being a woman, that's nothing to do with being Southern, but and oh, I had another one and it just slipped away. There's another thing, and I don't, there's a spectrum. Everybody is different about how they think of things, but I feel like in a lot of fiction written by males that I've seen, especially, made into movies and everything, like the first instinct is to attack or shoot something. And I'm always like, well, what if they tried to talk to the monster or the alien or the bad guy? So I write a lot of that into my stories too, where there's like some slightly different way of trying to, deal with it than grabbing a gun and, blowing something up or
I like that.
I have this awesome sticker and it is not sitting on my desk. It's out, but it's D20, for rolling D20. And it says number 20, I seduced the monster. Perfect for that.
That's a good
Caroline,
one.
what about you? You're on mute.
So the first thing that I thought of when you asked this question was this anecdote that I heard somewhere sometime but the idea, they talk about like if there were a group of 5 people and they were all men, the men would figure out if there was a solution to a problem that made 4 of them 100% happy and 1 of them 0% happy, they'd pick that one. If there was maybe it's that if a man is in charge of a group of 5 people and there's a solution that would make 4 of them 100% happy and 1 of them 0% happy, as long as it wasn't him that was 0% happy, that's the one that gets picked. When a woman is in charge, if there is a solution that makes everybody 80% happy and nobody less than that, that's the one that gets picked. And I think about that only in terms of like I think that as a woman writer, we have an interest in really serving everyone who might come to our book, to our page, everyone who we're trying to tell the truth about. And even if that, I think that there's a sense of trying to serve, because I think of writing as an act of service generally. I think that when you're writing, you're bearing witness to lives, even if, like, whether you're creating fantasy, horror, writing memoir, whatever, you're writing not just to please yourself, but to like somebody else is going to find pleasure or relief or recognition when they experience what you've put into the world. And I think that there is something about a woman flavored survival instinct, as far as I have experienced it, that helps us to be, I don't know, that enters our perspective that way. And the other piece of it that it hadn't occurred to me to say until I heard Amanda start talking was, I am right now working on a book proposal that I started like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think, actually. And that has really evolved over the course of, I've been married, I've now been pregnant twice. Both of them have resulted in ectopic pregnancies, which has been harrowing. But writing through it has been really powerful and has changed my proposal a lot, because I thought it was going to be very much one thing of this journey that I was like writing, and then it's a very different thing of the journey. But I think being willing to ask questions in public and share your truth, I think that in the ways that we do is a privilege of womanhood, like the sisterhood of like, I know that there are other women that haven't asked this question or have asked it, and nobody's consolidated the answers in one place. And I'm like, well, damn girl, like I'm going to consolidate this stuff for us. And there is a sense of allyship and sisterhood in just the fact of being a woman that as a writer, we get to bring to the page. So that's cool.
Cecilia, and I'm sorry, because I kind of feel like I've been making you follow after that.
That is quite yes, that was a beautiful answer. I would just like to go ahead and throw out there that I grew up in Alabama, and go Bulldogs. Also, I would love if anybody else from Birmingham is on this call, if you could validate this for me, because according to my husband, the way those of us from Birmingham identify each other is, where did you go to high school? Which I haven't seen anywhere else, which is interesting.
I think
But
that's very much a Southern thing.
yeah, probably because it's tied to football. But yeah, okay, so getting back to your question, one of the reasons I love writing in the genres that I write, urban fantasy and steampunk, is because the heroines tend to be the ones who are subverting the genre expectations. So in steampunk, they tend to be the ones who are going against the expectations of, oh, well, all you're good for is being in the home and raising children, and you don't get to go to college, you're not that smart. So women of that time period who actually were fighting for those rights, and so putting it in an alternate history setting makes it, I think, easier to read, and also easier for then me to tackle issues that are still happening today, like steampunk. And today it's like I have a whole talk. And then the other, with urban fantasies, like these are typically your kick-ass heroines who are facing the monsters, who are, they are fighting or the other effing the monsters that they encounter. Those are more Mel's books than mine. But yeah, and one thing that I would really love to see more of, and I don't know if you're going to get to this, Mel, is now that I have been coaching other writers, especially neuroatypical writers, it's been interesting to see how much of our feminine socializing overlaps with the masking that women with neuroatypical brains have been displaying, that keeps us from being diagnosed until adulthood. So I've found this to be an absolutely fascinating area of intersectionality that I hope that I do plan to explore more in my stories.
Anybody who's ever seen How I Prefer My Food knows that I'm hiding some massive neurodivergent, because if I had my way, we'd still have the little plates with all the dividers in it, so I can have each little bit of food never touching.
And I was diagnosed at 45 with ADHD, so I know I'm there too.
At this point, I think most of us are Gen X. At Gen X, it's just like, whatever, we're going to make it because we don't have a choice. So one of the things that is always hard for authors, and I mean, if any of you guys know the answer, please tell me, because last I heard, we're all working on it. But where do you find your audience? What are you doing that is helping you find audiences? And do you think that it matters that you're doing it as a woman versus maybe how a man would be doing it? And Cecilia, I'll start with you.
Well, as we were talking about before the panel started, I go to conventions, which helps. I do newsletter swaps with other authors, and I have a little bit of a social media presence. But I mean, yeah, it is an ongoing thing. It's never that you're like, okay, you have found your audience and you get to stop worrying about it. It's like, no. And then of course, things change. Right now there's a mass exodus from certain social media platforms because of what's going on in the rest of the world. And so it's like, so the people who've really built their followings there are kind of screwed. So, it does take some creativity and persistence. And honestly, right now I'm trying Substack with my Witch of the Word Substack, where I'm doing essays, and also hoping that there's going to be some fiction crossover.
And your essays are really fun. If nobody's been reading her Substack, absolutely sign up. I've been greatly enjoying them. Bernie.
I have no idea if I have an audience at all, but I did. I finally I got some reports from my publisher that I've written several nonfiction trivia books. They're pretty history heavy, and I've sold like maybe 1,400 of each of a couple of them so far, and that's you know, I don't know if that's good or bad, but but you know, they kind of handle that part, so I don't really see who's buying them or what, unless somebody comes up and talks to me. But at conventions, I do get to actually talk to people who either read my stuff or want to read it or buy them, or you know, and that's so I do the same thing. I go to Dragon Con. I do a couple of other conventions every now and then, and a lot of online panels and things like that. And I didn't, yeah, I kind of abandoned one social media platform recently, and I'm on another, and I mainly talk politics on there. So I don't know, I don't really know if I'm actually, I'll put a link to my latest book in the bio, you know, but I don't really know if I'm driving people to, you know, buy my books or not. I probably need someone to help me with this.
Me, yeah.
Yeah.
Caroline.
I think I'm also in the I probably need someone to help me with this camp. How do I find my audience? I luck and saying wild stuff occasionally in public that then gets me followers by accident. Like, I mean, I don't, you know, I don't I get sometimes I do a little bit of I did some punditing in the past. I don't do it as much anymore because I find that in order to speak on the news about what's going on in the world, you have to actually watch the news all the time, which really I don't have enough therapy for that. I don't have enough
No,
money.
no, no. My whiskey budget isn't large
Yeah.
enough for that.
So that all that to say I'm still navigating how to find my audience. I've been really lucky that enough audiences found me that I've made a career so far of I mean, I also teach for a living in addition to the writing because I don't think that the poeting and the yelling about politics together, I probably could figure out how to make enough money, but anyway, yeah, help. If anyone wants to help me make my audience different or expand the audience, that'd be great.
Well, Amanda, I kind of left you for last because you literally are the person who is trying to find an audience. So how do you get subscribers for the magazine and find authors to write for the magazine?
So, two-pronged answer to that. One is, and so I don't know that this is useful or applicable, but as a magazine, you know, we have we're sort of unusual for magazines in that we have almost 50-50 male-female readership. It's very, very unique to have sort of readers of both almost 50-50. And so they tend to be a little older, a little more fluent, and we're, you know, very loyal readers. Like I've never worked anywhere that had more loyal readers. So I'm so grateful for that. And part of that, you know, we just try to undergird with, you know, the brand and the magazine, because if there isn't that trust in the magazine, which is the pillar of everything we do, then that audience is going to go away. So, I mean, we're sweating. I mean, we fact check every single story, every single caption. We're sweating over those captions. We want to get it just right, because if we don't and we lose that trust, then we lose our audience. Also, we're thinking about the fact that, you know, what we provide, you know, I've stopped asking our college interns what their favorite magazines are, because it's just not where they're getting their information. But we recognize that that may change as people get older and go through different stages of life. So we do try to meet those, maybe they're not subscribers yet, but we try to meet those non-subscribers in different places through different things that we do through, you know, social media. Obviously, we put on, and again, this is maybe not applicable or useful, but we put on like dozens of events a year where they may not subscribe, they may not look at our socials, they just want to come to a fun party. And so, but it's a chance for us to like let the magazine come alive. And so anyway, we're always looking, even though the magazine itself, the print edition, is the basis of the pillar that everything else stands on, we're always thinking about how to extend that brand to maybe meet the audience of the future, you know, and introduce them to who we are and what we do. And then the second question was where we find writers. And that's like one of the most gratifying parts of my job is working with writers, and writers I have admired. In some cases, we get pitched a lot of stories. Sometimes they're coming to us. We also, if there's someone that we admire and we want to work with, we'll reach out to them. I think that's what we did with Caroline. And then also we're looking at like the books that are coming. We do a lot of timely stories. We also do evergreen stories, but when it comes to like book publishing, we know that the author is also looking to get some like momentum for their book. So we'll look to see what books are coming out down the line. And if we see an author that maybe we've wanted to work with, or they have a book coming out, then we'll reach out to them and say, here are some places in the magazine where, maybe you'd be interested in like an essay or something. And it's a chance for us to maybe get to work with a writer we've wanted to work with, and them to get their book and the information about it being released in that time frame in front of our audience too. So any number of ways, but those are just a few.
I mean, I found that interesting because I've never been involved with the magazine side of the world. I mean, not unless you count doing the newsletter in high school, which was multiple decades ago. So I personally, I'm rabidly indie. I publish all my own books. I publish books for the people who write with me. But this is a big thing in the world right now, is how do you get your books published? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about how are you doing it, and maybe what do you see coming down the pipeline, because things are changing drastically. And I know we've got a couple different points of view here, so I'm really kind of interested. Bernie, let's start with you.
Couple of different ways, because my fiction, I don't really make money off my fiction. I may have made like a few $100s off fiction. Nonfiction, I've gotten a few $1,000s a book as advance for the and I used to write How Stuff articles, tech articles for How Stuff Works, and I got paid pretty decently for those too. So I've got a couple of different. I actually I went on to, and I don't think the group is either there anymore or it's not the same, but I went onto a Facebook group that posted writers or jobs for writers specifically for women, and found a post one day just after I'd made a portfolio website of all my How Stuff Works articles and other stuff I'd written, and somebody there wanted a trivia book, and that's how I got the job writing trivia books for Ulysses Press. I think they're a small to medium press, but they're kind of affiliated somehow with Simon & Schuster, because my books kind of end up on their website, but I think they're distributed by Simon & Schuster. But they actually, I have a contract with a writer first and last refusal and everything, and just all kinds of legal stuff that where I can't just run off and write a nonfiction book for someone else very easily, but they give me an advance, and if I ever sell enough books, I'll get royalties on all of those. And I literally found it on a Facebook group, but because they liked the first one I did, they hired me to do several more. So and the first one was Big Book of Spy Trivia, which is actually my favorite. I mean, I like them all, but that's that topic. I love history, I love espionage, all that fascinating stuff. But and for nonfiction, I'm doing it more for fun. I'd like to make money at it one day. I'm editing a couple of books that I wrote a couple of years ago, but I throw not very great short stories on Vocal Media, but I'm actually I did a lot of contests on there. The best I ever got was runner up, and I got like a free year of Vocal, but for one of them. But that kind of keeps me writing. And I look for calls for submissions. A lot of my friends are in indie publishing, and they'll send stuff or they're authors too, and they'll say, "Hey, this one sounds like something. This is some gruesome horror thing. Well, you might like this," or not all that. I write other stuff, but so I get a lot of things that way, and I have a few things in anthologies and collections, and I'm actually working on another one. I have not self-published. I've always either published through a really, really tiny indie press or Ulysses Press, the bigger one. But I'm working on a collection of taking a lot of the stuff I put on Vocal and other places, improving it and sticking it in a book and selling it myself. So that'll be my next journey. Sorry, I chucked a little long.
Cecilia?
I started off traditional. I had my first 7 books with Sam Hain Publishing, 2013 to 2017. And I was really grateful for that experience because it gave me a good idea of the process that a book needs to go through to be really high quality. And so I've kept that going. And I luckily also kept my editor, which is awesome. So I continued those series on my own, and I now have a 3-book contract that I'm working on with Falstaff Publishing for a time travel fantasy adventure series. This is a micro publisher, basically. It's like one dude in North Carolina with a bunch of contractors. So things are moving a little slowly, but that's okay. As for my nonfiction, I'm also a hybrid. Business Basics for Private Practice, a guide for mental health professionals, was with Rutledge, Taylor, and Francis. And then I put out Better Sleep for the Overachiever on my own, and those are under my for real name. So as for how to get a book published, as I teach my students, it's all about your values, your goals for yourself, and your goals for your writing career. And I do think it is helpful to be hybrid because if you have been traditionally published, even though the perception is waning, there still is a perception that if you are traditionally published, that means your stuff is of better quality. However, the independent publishing, which is like where I am mostly, affords a whole lot more freedom and you get a lot more money. So yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages. So I would say this is a very, very individual choice.
Caroline?
Cecilia, I want you to know that like everything you say, I'm like writing down. I'm like, oh my God, please. Thank you so much, by the way. But I would say, and also to Cecilia's point, and also hi, Amanda, having a good relationship with an editor, like if you get lucky enough to find one, that is hugely impactful for figuring out, like increasing your productivity, helping organize your future thoughts. And for me, like building relationships in the, because I publish, essays and, I try to get them in the papers and the magazines and the things like that. And having relationships with people, like I used to be a New York Times person and now my editor that I love is at the Atlantic. And so I email the Atlantic when I have ideas now first, because the editor is the thing for me. So finding relationships that you trust with editors that you admire and who get you is really a valuable part of it. And I think, and for me, I'm sort of very curious about the independent publishing, which I have never done. I've worked almost exclusively with like big press stuff. And I'm and I would say that navigating that, having an agent has been really critical. And getting one of those, like, it's such a, I'm the luckiest girl in the world. I went to high school with a girl who worked really hard, and a woman who worked really hard and got a job in the opinion desk of a major newspaper publication. And so when I had my first idea, I was just lucky and I was able to say, hey, is this of a quality that you'd be willing to consider running up the flagpole? And she was like, yeah, I'm happy to, skip the slush pile. And that really helped me. So luck was a part of it. Writing a good piece that when I got lucky and had the friend writing a piece that then, her boss said, cool, I'm willing to go with this. That was transformative too. But for me, yeah, getting the yeses, finding the agents, it's like writing stuff in places that have a platform where people will see it is helpful. But I'm super curious about the self-publishing. So that's like that thing I just described is maybe is a patriarchal and tiresome way of doing things sometimes. So I'm maybe over it, but anyway.
Well, Amanda, I'd like to twist the question a little bit for you. Since you say you do work with authors and everything, are you aiming mostly for traditional, or are you looking for some of the indie authors and the people who don't have those ties to the big five at this point?
I mean, that isn't as important to us. Often that's how we're getting just introduced to writers because we are all voracious readers. And so, we'll get advanced copies or just when things come out. I mean, that's what I feel so boring sometimes because people are like, what do you like to do in your spare time? I'm like, read. every single moment. But that's what brings me joy, and that's how we find, writers that we want to work with, and so it's more so for us, um, the the voice, the point of view, the also the idea. Like, even if I've never worked with a writer before, if they have an idea that is just like straight down the middle for us, and I read some of their work, whether that's fiction, nonfiction, but I can get a sense of their voice, like I'm willing to take a chance on them because that idea is golden. Magazines are built on good ideas. So not so much like what the publishing background is, but that voice, the idea, the point of view, like just who you are as a writer. And if you're bringing something to, like, we're always thinking about the mix of the magazine and different voices in that mix, different points of view in that mix, different geographic, we're looking at every level because we want it to be as lively as possible, and that's a part of it.
Well, we've only got a few minutes left, and one of the things that Caroline said has raised this last question. So I'd like you really quickly to think, and then we'll open it up to questions from our audience. What is your story that you're bearing witness to? What's the truth that comes out in your stories? Because I know for me, it almost always comes out to be relationships. I write stories with friendships that cross species, with friendships that cross just about everything. And it is the idea of building that family based on relationships, not just marriage and love and everything else, but that you can have a family that is simply built on this life altering relationship. So, what is the truth that your stories are telling? Amanda, I'm actually going to start with you because I know you aren't writing stories, but maybe what is the truth that Gardens and Guns is telling?
Well, I will say that when I do have a chance to write, the thing that I see coming up the most for me is sort of um, the interplay of generations, especially within the women of my family. My mother, my grandmothers, my great grandmothers, they're very much of a place. My great grandmother had to quit school when she was like 7 in Georgia and go work to pick cotton, and worked in a cotton mill the rest of her life and never learned how to write. I just found a bunch of cards she wrote me when I was little, and I could tell that her daughter actually signed them because she never, learned to sign her name. And now just the fact that I get to write and read as my profession, and the work that she did, basically led to me being here. Just the effect of my family and like the generational play. Like, often in my writing, I find myself relating it to something with my mother, grandmother, great grandmothers, like that intergenerational um, relationships and echoes through the generations are really interesting to me. And that also tends to be what I, get drawn into with some of my favorite books too. Like, I think about like Zadie Smith's White Teeth, like the ability to tell a compelling story over generations is also what I'm drawn to as a reader.
Okay. Bernie?
I have a mix of I have a little of it, people forming friendships and bonds and makeshift families, but a lot. I also a lot of family turmoil, like relationship and family turmoil, and dealing with anxiety. I think that's probably the biggest thread through most of my my stuff. The characters are anxious, they're self-conscious, and I'm dealing with my own, feelings of those things through my writing.
Caroline?
I wrote down survival of the other. I think, I mean, and whatever that means, I'm always interested in stories of, the other day I found myself rereading out of the blue, Eli Wiesel's Night, and I was thinking about like the survive, and like I'm obsessed with narratives of the people who lived And whether that's women who are other in male spaces, Black people who are other in white spaces, poor people who are other in wealthy or elite spaces. I'm sort of obsessed with how you survive otherness, and how you tell that, you know, yeah. So that I think survival of the other is my obsession, and generally for me that winds up when I'm reading, it's anyone who's surviving. Like I love The Walking Dead. I love like the other are the living people who are not the zombies. Like it's like the survival of the other is, but when it's me, when I'm writing, it's Black people and women surviving in the South usually, sometimes in England, but mostly the South. But yeah, the survival of the other.
Cecilia?
I find that with a lot of my characters, there's always a pull between independence and vulnerability and interdependence. And often it's coming to the middle where they are both accepting themselves and standing up for themselves, but also allowing themselves to be vulnerable and in relationship with somebody where they have to learn to trust and work with other people to find the solution. And I think that's actually a pretty good theme for us on a panel is like, as women writers and women readers, because I mean, isn't that basically what we are always having to do in this patriarchal society?
I tell you, I'm really impressed, and I kind of want to like go get everybody's books and go read, but unfortunately I have books I have to write. So for the people who've been listening, do any of you guys have any questions? If so, you can either put them in chat, or if they want to raise their hand, Rebecca, I guess you could flag them on so they can speak. I know I type for a living. I type very fast. Not everybody else does. Let's see. Liz Carpenter asked, do you have a trick for dealing with a lack of inspiration or writer's block? Who wants to take that one? And they're all like, go for it, Cecilia.
Oh, first off, hi, Liz. Liz is actually the reason I'm on this panel, so thank you.
Ditto.
And one of the very first things that I teach is connecting to your values as a writer. Because when you've connected to your values, to those core principles, whether it's what keeps you going in nonfiction or what you are trying to convey, kind of like in our last question as fiction, that always brings you something to come back to. So that's kind of the deep answer. The not so deep answer is get out in nature and take a walk and look at green stuff. It really does help.
Okay,
I've got
are
kind
there
of
any other questions? Go, Bernie.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was going to say one of the ones that I do is go for a walk. That actually helps a lot. And not a lot of times indoors on the treadmill because I'm a wimp and I don't like to walk, outside up and down the hills and have to worry about cars. But but also watching, taking classes or watching documentaries. Like if I just do something completely different from what I get so many ideas when I'm watching like a physics documentary, which has nothing to do with my job or my writing or something like that. So that's it.
I
Okay.
sorry.
No, go ahead, Amanda.
I
Sorry.
was just going to say, as an editor, and I do this too, like often I find if a writer is getting stuck, it's because they haven't done enough like reporting or research first, and it's almost creating like a mental block. I also work with a lot of essayists, nonfiction essayists in the magazine, and often I find myself, and pushing them to get more personal, that's within the personal comes the universal. And sometimes, there is that fear in all of us to really pull back the mask and get personal. And, a part of my job as an editor to help the writer work through that and not pushing people beyond where they're comfortable with, because you want them to feel, comfortable in what they're sharing, but helping them not be afraid at the same time is something I try to do as an editor.
We have another question asking about how do you feel about being a Southern women writers and aging? Does it make things easier, or do you feel more invisible with age? At least for me and myself, tell you hitting menopause was the best thing ever on the face of the earth. Was really nice. But look, my hair is purple. I don't do invisible well. What about the rest of you ladies?
I kind of want to be invisible. It's kind of I mean, I want people to buy my books. I want to, but as far as like being seen, it was a long time before I would go on a meeting like this or a call, But I think after I hit somewhere in my mid 40s, I don't know if it was hormones, it could be the shift into menopause, but I got a little more confident and a little less worried about what other people thought. And actually I've gotten a lot more done. And also I got diagnosed, like I said, ADHD, and I've gotten so much more done since then. I not just throwing away, caring what other people think too much. I mean, I'm not going to go, tell everyone off or anything, but but I think it helps a lot.
I
With
love
wisdom, age comes wisdom.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Like my husband is a writer too, and we talk about the things we write today versus what we would have written when we were like 20 years ago. And just the context of having lived a life since then makes no matter what you're writing about so much richer because of
Yep.
the experience that you've been through. And that's not to say that you can't write wonderful things when you're young. But I'll say for me personally, I think the context of the life that I've lived has made my writing and reporting and just thinking much, much richer. And I love getting older for that.
And
Carolyn?
I think that for me, I remember like my undergraduate thesis, which was creative. I think the critique was that the poet had a very limited subject obsession, which was the self or something like that. And I think that, as I've gotten older, I'm so much more interested in other people and other circumstances beyond my own life. And, you're less precious with yourself, whether you're writing about yourself or not. I feel like using my insight is useful, but I feel a little bit less, I feel more able to obsess myself with things beyond myself and write about them thoughtfully. And then I do want to say about the writer's block. Maya Angelou, I was trying to find it, has a really cool interview in this edition. I keep this on my desk. This is the fall 1990 Paris Review. And it's a really cool writer's craft talk it's an interview with a writer about her writing practice. And she used to rent herself a hotel room every day, 5 days a week, every weekday, 6:30 in the morning. Sometimes she'd just play cards with herself all day. She'd put a bottle of sherry, a deck of cards, and a yellow lined notebook. And she would either drink or play cards or write or get like as much done as she could by, I think, 12:30 in the afternoon. She sat 6 hours in there every day. She invited the muse. She got something some days, she got nothing other days. But I think it's like that whole, is it Baudelaire, Apollinaire, il faut être toujours ivre, you must always be drunk. On wine, on art, on poetry, you must always be drunk, right? So there's something about wooing yourself into the space and then just showing up at the space and seeing some ritual to that, I think that's my writer's block. And having that Pavlovian dog, when in worst case scenario, I play the St. Crispin's Day speech from Kenneth Branagh's Henry V. And usually that'll get me off my ass if there's like an urgent thing.
That's great.
I know that I have. Yeah, go Cecilia.
I was going to say that I have not worried about being invisible since I had many conversations with patients, mostly female patients, and realized, you know what? Nobody's actually caring about what you do because everybody is so concerned about what other people think about them. So it's not even a question.
Cecilia knows this, but I've buried my husband, I've buried my father, I've buried my mother, I've buried, I think, almost every relative I have at this point. And I learned the hard way that I can survive anything. So there really isn't much out there in life that scares me. Tornadoes still scare me. This last week just sucked. I don't like earthquakes. Earthquakes are so much better. Okay, we are at the end of our time, so I would like to go around, remind them where they can find you, where they can support you, and then we will say goodbye. So I will start with you, Bernie.
You can find links to my stuff at berniejohnson.com, BERNI without the E at the end. And that's it.
Caroline?
CarolineRandallWilliams.com or Caro Randwill on Instagram, CARORANWILL. I put all my stuff there. So
Cecilia?
You can find my fiction at ceciliadominic.com, and that's CECILIA. You can find more about my nonfiction books and writing mentoring at psychupacademy.com, and my Substack is Witch of the Words. And this is Timothy
Amanda.
Nouse.
Yes, I figured it was Timothy saying hi. Amanda?
Oh, I'm sorry. You can find us at gardenandgun.com, and I am on Instagram at Amanda B as in boy Heckert, all one word. And you always are welcome to email me too. My email at Garden and Gun is aheckert@gardenandgun. I will say that I get a lot of emails, so please be forgiving if it takes a little bit to get back to you, but you are welcome to email me.
And if you'd like to support me, you can find me at Bad Ash Publishing. And I have like 45, 50 something books out. So you're probably going to find at least something you like. And I am pretty much on all the social medias under Bad Ash Books. So ladies, thank you so much. Audience, thank you so much. And I hope you had a great time.